What does China owns in Jamaica? Go into any size supermarket or any store in Jamaica and chances are that store is owned and operated by a Chinese person. The Chinese are everywhere in Jamaica. They are operating most of our stores and supermarkets, and they are building our roads, our buildings, and spending millions funding some of these projects. But have you ever wondered how much of Jamaica does China owns? Well, in this video we'll try and find out. The presence of Chinese in Jamaica traces back to 1849. Between 1854 and 1886, Chinese laborers were brought into the island as indentured laborers, shortly after emancipation. The English plantation owners realized that the African descendants, having been freed from slavery, were reluctant to work on the sugar estates. Based on this realization, they decided to import Chinese and East Indians to work for them. By 1854, the first group of 472 Chinese came to Jamaica from Panama. Prior to this time, there were about 30 Chinese living in Jamaica. The second batch of about 200 coming from Trinidad and British Guyana arrived in Jamaica between 1864 to 1870. On June 12, 1884, a third group of about 680 arrived straight from China, all having 3-year contracts to work on the sugar estates. However, they disliked the nature of the work and soon they left the estates and set up small grocery shops all across the island. Eventually, they were able to develop their businesses until the small groceries grew into large enterprises embracing not only retailing but also wholesaling and other types of activities. In 1905, the Jamaican government noticed the increased population of Chinese immigrants and passed a law that restricted entry into the country if certain criteria were not met. The law passed emphasized 3 main areas. Immigrants had to be registered with immigration authorities before entry. Immigrants had to have a guarantor from a reliable shop. This guarantor should be able to prove that the immigrant is law-abiding and will not be a burden on society. Having arrived in Jamaica, the authorities needed to know their address and contact information. From this point onward, the immigration law had become very strict. By 1930, there were 4,000 Chinese immigrants in Jamaica. By 1931, the government had stopped issuing passports as an effort to reduce the Chinese invasion, as it was called then. In another 6 years, the figure reached a high of 6,000. As a result of this, between 1931 and 1940, there were additions to the immigration law that includes the immigrants having to successfully pass a written and oral English language test, paying a fee before entry, doing a medical examination which should prove whether or not the immigrant is physically fit and healthy. After their contracts had expired, many were reluctant to return to China as they knew what effect communism would have had on their return. Overpopulation, drought, flood and famine were added reasons why they left China as well as why they remained in Jamaica. In 1980, many of those who had remained in Jamaica started retail businesses trading in grocery items with a few shops set up in Kingston. They as a group developed the Chinese Benevolent Society founded by Shangfa Fukon in 1890. The purpose of the society was to look after their interests and welfare, to promote charitable activities and mutual assistance among themselves, and to act as arbitrators in the settlement of their disputes. By 1954, there were over 1,000 commercial establishments owned by the Chinese. In 1970, the number amounted to 0.7% of Jamaica's population. In 1982, this fell to 0.2% as many migrated to Canada and the United States of America. Multiple incidents of anti-Chinese violence throughout the economic turmoil of the mid and late 20th century and the adoption of socialist policies by the administration of Prime Minister Michael Manley led to mass immigration of the Hakka Chinese population in the 1970s and 1980s. Building on his time as labor organizer, Manley ran on a platform that saw racial and economic equity for Jamaica's poor black lower class as achievable only through radical change and democratic socialism. Once in office, Manley implemented a series of social policies that prioritized the needs of Jamaica's marginalized black majority, including a national minimum wage, paid maternity leave, abolition of bastardy laws, and price controls on staple products. However, his amendments to the income tax laws that were to fund his redistributive policies were less well received by Jamaica's upper and middle classes, mainly of whom were Chinese. Manley's increasingly socialist tone and his relationships with leaders like Cuban President Fidel Castro led to international scrutiny by countries such as the United States. An ensuing destabilization campaign by its Central Intelligence Agency CIA and a corresponding reduction in international investments. Due to a significant brain drain, economic and political insecurity and resource scarcity, much of the Jamaican Chinese population moved to the United States or Canada, reducing the overall Chinese population in Jamaica from 11,781 in 1970 to 5,320 by 1980. In the 1980s and 1990s, a new wave of Chinese migrant laborers came to Jamaica to work in factories within the Kingston Free Zone, established in 1976 to boost the Jamaican economy. The Kingston Free Zone provided tax exemption to attract companies, mainly from the US and Hong Kong, to set up export processing plants there. Predominantly female Chinese workers specialize in the garment industry within the Kingston Free Zone, though exact numbers remain unclear. These workers had limited interaction with the local Jamaican population, mainly engaging in grocery shopping and English classes. After the decline of the KFZ, some migrant women returned to Jamaica, establishing wholesale businesses and sparking a new wave of Chinese migration. The group, unlike the earlier Hakka Chinese community, came from diverse regions of China and primarily spoke Mandarin. Their perseverance revitalized the wholesale grocery trade and led to the formation of hometown associations. Jamaica recognized the People's Republic of China in 1972, establishing the PRC Embassy and the Jamaica-China Friendship Association in subsequent years to foster greater local understanding of China. Fast forward to today, and the Chinese are still carrying on with business in Jamaica and are funding and building out our infrastructure. Chinese investment in Jamaica has soared in recent years. China has poured money into the country, with its foreign direct investment increasing from $40 million in 2011 to $839 million by 2016. Additionally, Chinese policy banks have loaned $2.1 billion to the Jamaican government between 2005 and 2022. This funding has mainly gone towards building roads, revitalizing cities, and developing Jamaica's natural resources. Notably, the North-South Highway, completed in 2016, links major areas like Ocho Rios and Kingston, financed by a $457 million loan from the China Development Bank and investments from China Harbor Engineering Company. Under the leadership of the Portia Simpson Miller administration, Jamaica granted China 1,200 acres of land to construct the North-South Highway in exchange for expertise and investment. The Chinese intended to build 3 luxury hotels comprising a total of 2,400 rooms on the land surrounding the highway. Other Chinese-funded projects include road reconstructions, highways, and even Jamaica's first road overpass, the 3 Miles Bypass. In addition to infrastructure projects, Chinese companies like Huawei, ZTE, and others have invested in Jamaica. Chinese automakers have entered into the island, leading to an influx of Chinese cars over the past few years. Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD and Great Wall Motors have been selling cars in Jamaica through Stewart's Automotive, and one of the most popular trucks on our road is made by the Chinese. Chinese truck manufacturer Shopman is slowly becoming the truck of choice for trucking companies and truck drivers, which are sold by Tankwell Jamaica. Numerous small Chinese-owned businesses have also sprung up across the island, many of which sell wholesale goods. Despite these investments, there is debate about whether Chinese policies directly influence migration, with concerns raised about workers' rights and perceptions of migrants. Moreover, China has invested in educational projects, notably establishing Confucius Institutes in Jamaica, with the largest one in the Caribbean being inaugurated in 2019 at the UWI. Now let's talk about Jamaica's involvement in China's Belt and Road Initiative. First of all, what is China's Belt and Road Initiative? China's Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) is an ambitious plan to develop 2 new trade routes connecting China with the rest of the world. But the initiative is about far more than infrastructure. It is an effort to develop and expand interdependent market for China, grow China's economic and political power, and create the right conditions for China to build a high-technology economy. There are 3 main motivations for the BRI. The first and most discussed internationally is China's rivalry with the US. The vast majority of Chinese international trade passes by sea through the Malacca Strait off the coast of Singapore, which is a major US ally. The initiative is integral to China's effort to create its own more secure trade routes. There is no doubt that China's intention is also to make participating nations interdependent with the Chinese economy and thereby build economic and political influence for China. In that respect, it has similarities with the Marshall Plan that followed the Second World War, but with the essential difference that China dispenses funding to other nations based purely on shared economic interests. The second key reason for the initiative is the legacy of the 2008 financial crisis. China's government responded to the emergency with a 4 trillion yuan stimulus package, issuing contracts to build railways, bridges and airports, but saturated the Chinese market in the process. The Belt and Road Framework provides an alternative market for China's vast state-owned companies beyond the borders of China. Finally, the Belt and Road is seen as a crucial element in the Chinese government's efforts to stimulate economies of the country's central provinces, which historically lags behind richer coastal areas. The government uses the Belt and Road to encourage and support businesses in these central regions, allocating budget generously and encouraging businesses to compete for Belt and Road contracts. Jamaica was one of the first Caribbean countries to join China's Belt and Road Initiative. In 2019, Jamaica signed a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) with the PRC's ambassador to Jamaica, Tian Kui, joining the Belt and Road Initiative. While the PRC had many investments in Jamaica at the time of signing, the MOU provided the basis for future policy, coordination and financial support from the PRC. At the May 2019 BRI Forum, Ambassador Tian praised Jamaica for joining the BRI, saying, "Looking into the future, I envisage high-quality Belt and Road cooperation in enhancing connectivity by promoting policy synergy and infrastructure development, unimpeded trade, financial cooperation and people-to-people bonds, thereby enhancing practical cooperation for the well-being of our peoples." For developing countries like Jamaica, the concept of the Belt and Road Initiative is attractive, as we lack the financial muscle to invest the large sums required for proper infrastructure development, especially roads and modernizing seaports and airports. But what is the big catch with all these Chinese investments and Chinese loans to fund these projects? Well, let's talk about that. Have you ever heard of the Belt and Road Initiative debt trap, also called debt trap diplomacy? Debt trap diplomacy is the accusation that China uses Belt and Road as part of a manipulative global strategy, funding major infrastructure projects in developing nations with unsustainable loans, then using the debt to gain leverage over those governments. The accusation was sparked by projects such as the Hambantota port development in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan government was unable to service the Chinese loans which funded the project, and the port was handed to the Chinese on a 99-year lease in 2017, echoing tactics employed by 19th century European imperialists against Qing dynasty China. The port provides the Chinese with a major new piece of infrastructure and a strategic foothold in the Indian Ocean. However, although it benefits Chinese interests, the port was conceived as part of a Sri Lankan strategy, and the misconduct and incompetence of local elites played a crucial role in its failure. Now, will what happened to Sri Lanka happen here in Jamaica? Many critics of China's Belt and Road Initiative says China's investments in Jamaica have striking similarities to the situation with Sri Lanka. So far, Jamaica owes China approximately $90 billion, 4.5% of Jamaica's $2 trillion debt. Now, what if Jamaica actually defaults on our Chinese loans? Well, the same thing that happened to Sri Lanka might happen to us. There's a narrative that Beijing has the right to take control of infrastructure built with its money if borrowers are unable to repay their debt. But according to Jamaica's leaders, Jamaica have nothing to worry about because Jamaica's Chinese loans amount to less than 4% of its total debt portfolio. Now, there are many more things to discuss about China's influence and relationship with Jamaica, but we'll just leave it here for this video. Feel free to add anything that I might have left out in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, comment, share and subscribe.